just before when you were doing your yoga. I was just writing on the page of the, you know, as you know, in Austria it is at the moment like that. Yeah. That the People's Party, so the Conservative Party, tries to change the work time regulations, so that every employee has to be ready to work up to 12 hours a day now, if his boss wants him to.
If it's necessary.
If it is necessary, but who says it's necessary? Of course the boss says it's necessary. Yeah? Who else?
No.
And
the worker is just, you know, waiting for the opportunity to work long hours.
Yeah. Pardon? Yeah, some people want to earn a bit more money and therefore want to be able to control their own work time as well. What is fine, but the thing is always that there is a bit of a difference between how much power the employer and the employee has. And that was always like that.
Mm-hmm.
But therefore all the countries, or a lot of countries, started having unions, workers' unions, in order to protect the rights of the workers, of the employees. And
so
now,
exploited.
And now more and more they try to erode them, because now since there is the Conservative government elected under the new Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, he sees that as a command from the population that he should run for whatever his agenda is, and he's now trying to cut or do exactly what the industry wants him to. For example, it was not even such a big topic in that, I think you know it already, but the KTM, this motorcycle manufacturer, really famous for motocross motorcycles and stuff like that. They are being built here in Austria, in Styria.
Mm-hmm.
And the boss gave Sebastian Kurz openly 400,000 euros for his campaign. And his name is Pira or something, this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the guy doesn't do that for nothing. He wants something for it. And he's openly a supporter of more rights for the employers, that the employers have more access, and that he wants it to be easier for the employer to use his employees however he wants.
Yeah, but I'm sure Kurz just says, well, this was my policy anyway, and this person gave me 400 in money, all this money in support of my campaign, because they knew that I already believed in something that they want.
Absolutely right, totally agree.
I'm not sure how true that is, or if you can even separate it. You know, if you have a certain political opinion or standpoint, and you're naturally then in your role as minister, like he was before, you come into contact with different people all the time, business people and other important people in Austria, and then you sort of, through your discussions with them, align your opinion somehow, or adjust what your knowledge about something is, and therefore your opinion on it, depending on who you're in contact with the most.
Who you're talking with.
So it's a question of, this is the problem with the elite.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
That the elite never come into contact with the beggar.
Normal people.
And so I think your whole perspective on what people want becomes really skewed, because then you're in contact with people to whom it's normal to work a 12-hour day, like people in high-level positions in management and stuff. I mean, they are at the top or whatever, and for them it might be normal to have to work a 12-hour day sometimes, or perhaps all the time.
Whenever they want.
Or perhaps all the time. And I don't know, unless they're the top, there might be a board above them, so they might themselves also be kind of forced.
Of course, but that's not an excuse.
But they also receive, 200,000 euros a year.
Yeah. Yeah, but look, this is exactly what Strache was saying. There was just so Strache is the head of the Freedom Party, what is the very right party in Austria, and he is with the People's Party in a coalition now, and is doing, and they are the government since December 2017. And he said just recently that he is working more than 12 hours almost every day. But you have to compare as well what his work is. His work is that a chauffeur is picking him up in the morning from his nice house on the side of the city where it's super silent. He gets a nice sleep. He lives there really comfortably. Then he gets driven to a meeting where he has a meeting where he meets a few people. Then he goes on to have a little catering somewhere. Then he maybe even flies somewhere and stuff like that. And of course there's a lot of traveling involved as well. You cannot compare that with someone who is working 12 hours in the steel industry and stuff like that. And that's what they are doing here. They are comparing, they are putting everything together, saying 12 hours is going to be the status quo now, and say it is also not that you have to do it. You can say without any reason you can say no. But how realistic is that? Your
Totally
employer,
unrealistic.
absolutely, because
Totally unrealistic. And I think what you said about not only the type of work but how your non-work time is spent is also really important.
Absolutely.
So you can't compare. I mean, you just mentioned it briefly, but you could have also elaborated this out and said he wakes up at 6 in the morning. He might do a workout or something on his home gym equipment. Then he might have a coffee on his terrace and take in some silence and some sun with a nice view or whatever. And you compare that to someone who's going to work in washing laundry or in the back of a kitchen for 12 hours that day, who wakes up and they might have a family, or let's say they don't. Let's say they're just a single person who wakes up on their ground floor apartment, Hofseite, on the Innenhof side, so it's a bit cold, it's a bit dark. They don't have a balcony. They don't have, no one's coming to pick them up. They then have to travel for 40 minutes from a cheaper area of town into the city to work in their job. I mean, this is a totally different
that's
sense of relaxation. Maybe you're on a main street, or you don't get a very good night's sleep all the time. I mean, you can't compare this kind of life, and that's exactly why these elite kind of people, when they don't come into contact with regular people, and actually people across all spectrum, the whole spectrum, they get a warped view, and they start to think, maybe, we've talked about this before with Kurtz, why do the people believe him so much? Yeah, because somehow he's convincing, because it seems like he really believes this himself.
Yeah.
This stuff. He really believes that there is really nothing wrong with the 12 hours.
Goes on.
I mean, he really thinks that people have this freedom. He believes that people have the ability to say no. No, I don't want to work that long. No, I rather... You know what I mean? Like this is because he hasn't maybe come into contact with many people. I mean, he himself doesn't have a lot of work experience.
He doesn't have any
work
experience.
And he went from being a young ÖVP guy straight into being a minister, straight into now being the friggin' Chancellor of Austria.
31 years. He's
31 years old.
And he's the Chancellor of 8 million people.
I don't want to say that young people aren't competent in doing high-level positions.
No, but experience.
You cannot possibly have experience as much as someone who's 20 years older when you have not gone and worked in other positions in other countries or anything. There are some young people who have a huge range of experience because they have just gone for it. Yeah. They've gone out there but he's stayed in Vienna in his comfy little shell and worked his way up the ladder.
He's really good, I have to say, how he's selling the stuff and how confident he seems. Seems really, I think the people, they just trust him because he gives them the feeling when he talks that he knows what he's doing. But as soon as you ask deeper, and journalists, luckily there are many journalists who try to get him again and again and expose him a bit in his not knowing what he's doing, but all the time he's getting asked uncomfortable questions. He's just slipping around it really good, yeah, or making fun of the journalists and stuff like that, turning away from them and stuff like that. They just don't get him. That's unbelievable. They just
So
don't.
that's just a bit like an arrogant psychopath.
Yeah, seems a bit like that.
Oh.
But the funny thing is, I mean, how can it be that that this party got so many votes? How can it be that
Well, I
so
mean,
many?
the party is really established. If he was an independent, he never would have got that following.
So this People's Party in Austria was basically back then, by all entrepreneurs and all self-employed people were electing them, plus all the farmers. Austria had a lot of farmers. All the farmers saw themselves as being represented by the People's Party. And nowadays, the farmers don't see it like that anymore as well, because the People's Party also seems to be really pro-big international corporations.
It's really like the Liberal National
globalization, absolutely, like in the US and in
Australia,
in
the Liberal
Australia,
National Party, yeah.
the Liberal National Party, yeah. They are really, they say profit for every, whatever it means, yeah. Profit is the highest.
All costs.
Profit and growth is the highest target, whatever that costs. Yeah. And that's what Kurz is basically
Super
promoting as
neoliberal,
well.
yeah.
I just read today, or the day before yesterday already, I read that now they are changing as well this approval process when you want to make a factory somewhere. Yeah?
It's easier now.
It's easier. There were some, you know, environment regulations before you had to pass, and that all takes a certain amount of time. What did they do now? They said, okay, we make a lid on that, on the time. So if until this time nothing happens, it will automatically be passed.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's easy, because now they just don't touch it and it's going to be passed. That's what they're.
But these are the time frames that I was working with in my job as a town planner. That you must, as the person making the application, you have 14 days to respond to some further information. So once you make your application, it's received, and it has to be received within a certain time frame. And then the authorities come back to you with further questions, and you have to provide the information within a certain time frame. And then once you do, once it's confirmed that you've provided everything that's been asked for, they must make a decision within a certain time frame, or ask for additional information, or some other, there's certain things that are allowed to be done. And this means that everything running well, that there's a maximum time frame that it should take if everyone does their bit and nobody asks for an extension of time.
And what if?
So this makes it, they say that this introduces more certainty for people who are starting one of these processes.
Okay,
it doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing, but what it does do is it places a lot of pressure on both sides.
That the people get the stuff done, yeah? But it cannot be.
And if you've got a lot of money as a developer, then you're unfairly, you have an unfair advantage in that you can just simply have a lot of people working on it and preparing something that's really complex, and then you have
just to pass this time.
And depending on the resources within the public sector, do they have the resources to even evaluate a biological assessment, an ecological assessment, some tree survey, some this, some that, engineering reports? Do you have the time? Are the time frames realistic for the scale? Yeah, do you have the time and the resources to manage something of a large scale with high complexity? And do those timeframes reflect it appropriately? So
if someone has enough money to employ a few people who prepare an inquiry that is too complex for the governmental institution to process it in time, he can easily manage to push through every project that he wants if he just makes the inquiry complex enough.
I mean, in some cases, it simply just is that complex. It is really complex.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, the people do that. I'm sure they do that.
And once you create an environment where it's more attractive to be, well, if you don't have a lot of resources in the government and you're not providing a lot of funding, then you end up with people that simply don't have the right qualifications to be making these assessments.
Next thing, yeah.
And then they're likely to either approve it, because this is where the political culture becomes really important. Because then you have a decision to make. If you don't have the skills all the time to do something properly, you either say no and be conservative. When in doubt, I'd rather say no.
Yeah.
This doesn't look good. Or you just say you're in doubt and you say yes.
Yeah.
And this really depends on the political environment. The environment that Kurtz is creating is one of when in doubt, rather let it go through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But is that conservative? I don't think this. Therefore, here you see that conservative and liberal are two things that do not fit together.
No, you can be really conservative in terms of your assessment and rather take care and be cautious.
Yeah.
So it's more like this rule of caution rather than allowing something to happen. And that is conservative in its true definition of the word.
Absolutely.
But the political conservative notion is different.
The political conservative, I think the political conservative is just against everything, every improvement for society, for the normal people, because the political conservatives, they are always willing to improve stuff that profits their clients, aka the industry. Yeah, that's fine. Also, when it comes to environmental impacts are okay as soon as the profit and the growth of the businesses is not suffering.
I mean, conservative in our time is really this attached to neoliberal. So it's basically hardline promotion of the principles of neoliberal political economy. So it must be quantifiably good for more people, and when you say what is good, they say, well, profit maximization and growth. So economic growth is good, is better, makes everyone's life better. Is this sort of underlying principle? I mean, they say that it's value free because it's also technical and whatever, but that is a huge value judgment to make, that economic growth is good for everyone. That somehow advances the quality and enjoyment of our lives. That's a huge value statement.
This is a really big
highly
topic
contested.
as well.
Highly contested. But so when you talk about conservative political parties, it's generally that, and sometimes like it's more often this neoliberal conservative position. But you also have like conservative from a religious point of view as well. You might have,
But you know what? Apropos a religious point of view, there was a statement from the church about the 60-hour day as well that you might not even know. And they say they come from a really interesting point of view. First of all, they are against the 60-hour. They are against Sunday work. Yeah, in Austria we still don't have the Sunday work. Only in a few things, like on gas stations, you can fill your tank. Restaurants, yeah, the whole gastronomy. Where else? I mean, all 2 or 3 years they try again in Vienna to push through that the Maria-Hilfer-Straße, the main shopping street, is allowed to be open on every second Sunday or so. But they never succeeded because there is still a very strong social democratic backbone in Vienna, at least. Not in the rest of Europe, of Austria. The rest of Austria is really neoliberal already because the whole entrepreneur spirit really succeeded. Because it is like that, you're living in a little village, you have 3-4 companies, and these 3-4 companies are determining the whole culture. Because everyone is working in one of these companies, everyone is dependent on them, and so you really, as a worker on the countryside, living in a little village, you really start to believe in this and how that works. You don't have as many chances as when you're living in a big city, where you actually, if you do not succeed in one job, you can go to the other one without it having any impact on your reputation as well.
Oh, yeah, because people don't know you.
They don't know you, yeah.
Anonymity.
Absolutely. But that's how the whole culture, and that's how the whole, also the political orientation of people is really dependent on in which under which circumstances they live. Also in a country like Austria, but what is a rich country, but there is still some variation because of your unique life situation.
But I think this is what's really interesting. That this is not unique to Austria. This is everywhere. You look at the voting tendencies. There's a similar pattern in many countries. I don't know about places like China and things like that, but or Russia also. If this changes between highly urbanized areas and rural areas, that the voting tendency seems to shift to more conservative.
The more rural, the more conservative.
And often because with the conservative parties, there tends to be a history of being involved in farming and stuff like that. So there's a historical thing here that has shifted with the times because, early capitalism, early foundation years of business, and what business was largely agricultural based. So these capitalist parties really made a transition as capitalism changed over the time as well, because it used to be something a bit more innocent, let's say it like that, that capitalists were owner-operated businesses. It wasn't so complex with corporations like it is. Corporations were never meant to be a status quo. It was something that used to pop up, project-based, purpose-oriented, time-restricted.
Until it's done.
Do its function, build a bridge, build a whatever, and die.
Sounds legit.
And this was really to protect the integrity of responsibility that should be on the person who seeks to make profit.
Yeah.
So those who make profit stand the greatest risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it is not working out, every employee will be still paid. But he might fuck up and he might end up with a lot of debts. Yeah.
He stands to lose everything.
Everything. Yeah, but what does that mean?
Everything that's invested.
Okay, everything that is invested, but is he also liable for more?
I mean, it should be said as well that the financial structure was very different at that time as well, where you couldn't necessarily raise funds that didn't exist.
Yeah.
In quite the same as you can now. It's far easier now to raise. Or let's say now, before the financial crisis, it was even easier.
But since the 90s, the banks can have 10 times as much loans as they have liquid capital. So of course they can borrow people much more money.
Yeah, and I think now the whole structure of the way businesses are run has become much less personal. And so now you have this merging or this transition of conservative governments that used to represent rural interests and agricultural interests, now merging with high turnover, less product producing corporations and companies in the city. And I think what happens then is that you simply have a concentration of people who are exposed to more possibilities, and what happens when you have certain structures within organizations and how fickle these big corporations are. So maybe you see more of, you stand to benefit more in a highly urbanized area, but you also have a greater chance that you've been subject to the negative aspects of it as well. So you tend to have, you may be more skeptical or critical of accepting what you're told, because you just see people begging on the street. You see that everything's not perfect because everyone's shoved together in like this sardine can. And on the countryside, you kind of watch that from afar, and you assume that, okay, people with all these liberal views, liberal in the true sense, liberal views are misguided somehow, and they've lost touch with the reality of where their food comes from and how
their little office jobs,
what real work is like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they can't possibly understand. So it creates this sort of division
lack of understanding
of worldviews, perhaps, and
Absolutely.
maybe that affects the voting structure and how different it can be between urban and rural areas.
There are as well on the countryside people who are electing Green for a Green party and so on. And in Germany the left. In Germany they have a left party as well. In Austria we do not have any left party anymore. The Greens just dropped out of the parliament totally, so they didn't make the 5% because of certain things like their former boss dropping out, Eva Klawischnik. She left the Greens and started a job in the gambling industry, working for Novomatic, the biggest Austrian gambling machine manufacturer. What is totally contradictory to what she was saying before. There is an interview from the year 2017 election campaign where she on TV was talking bad about Novomatic and said that they are destroying lives of families, that they are bringing people in debt, knowing what they do to them and so on. And then just half a year later she starts.
Yeah, maybe she believes that you can change corporations like that from the inside.
That's her argument, but I mean, looking at her, and I'm observing the Austrian political environment now since a while, and also her and what she's doing, I think she's taking some medication. I don't know what's happening with her, but she looks a bit, if something happened there, maybe some mental problems, whatever, could be in top politics. Yeah, I'm sure it's really hard. And she was the only. And the funny thing is, she was also the only woman in the whole circle. Yeah? Of all the heads of the parties, she was the only female one. Yeah? And in this, and look at the other ones, especially from the more right-wing side. They even use this, yeah, as to give her shit. That's the thing. Yeah, there was often some from Strache, from the head of the Freedom Party, from the right-wing party. There were often sexist comments during conversations.
I mean, that's normal.
It's
not okay, but it's normal.
But really hectic, really hectic. Yeah, but that's the status quo now. So that they want to introduce the 60-hour week.
What did the church say?
The church said Sundays have to be for the family and to go to the church. And this is something that was arranged in times where government and church were still much more unified and cooperative. And I mean, now it is like the People's Party, the Black Party, the ÖVP. They still call themselves a Christian conservative party, but there is nothing like Christian in there anymore. The whole Christian thing is just a bit of it's just a weight on the legs under where all the moral views are being caught in, and it's actually more an obstacle for growth, against growth. And that's that's how it looks now.
But I mean, the idea of the 60-hour work week is on the basis of 12-hour work days. So there's no need to work on Sunday. So what does the church say in general about what working a 12-hour day does to a family structure? I mean, there's the health aspect of it's not healthy to work such long days.
Everyone knows. I mean, these are psychological facts. There are studies about that more than 5 hours per day, about the concentration drops, the possibility of injuries increase, and the productivity drops like crazy. And
especially the point with injuries, I mean, you have to look at industry specific. Which are the industries where people are likely to be asked to work 12 hours a day? So a lot of
industry.
Exactly. So I mean, the risk of injuring yourself during a work day where you're working with highly dangerous equipment, really, and you're responsible for the safety of other people as well. I mean, this is really problematic.
Absolutely.
and negligent. You know, this is negligent to just say, okay, now we're just going to make it possible. It's like feeding some animals really well and others not, and then putting them all together and throwing a few bits of food in, only enough for half of them, and saying, go for it.
Interesting analogy.
You know, go for it. Who can make it work? You know, who are the stronger ones?
Yeah, I mean that's competition, right?
This is exactly the premise of competition, where it's like, okay, well, you know, but if you can defend yourself. If you don't want to work a 12-hour day, you just say no.
You know.
But the reality is, if you take the competition philosophy to the next step, it's like, well, if you don't want to do it, I'll find someone else who will. And this is actually the underlying message that's not been acknowledged by the UFA pair. They're not acknowledging that the reality is, the basis of competition is, you do it or someone else will.
But you know what they say, what they hold against this statement. They hold against it that, but look at the employee. The employee says, if I do not work for you and you treat me bad, I go to someone else and work for someone else. But it is not like that. It is not that easy. Because if you really look at it, it is much more, especially the bigger the company is, the more replaceable the individual is. Yeah. Of course, it is more like that within a five people company. But if you look at the big companies, you are replaceable like that. They always find someone else. And this is also really funny, because the Black Party also pretends to be the open border, open mind party and so on. And they try to catch the people from the Green Party now a bit with that. Because they say, hey, we are absolutely the people, they can come in to Austria, and we need workers anyway. And the thing is that with the request demand thing, with the demand, how do you call it?
Supply demand. So
the supply demand thing, when it comes to workforce, they can press down the hourly rates and the price for work as well if they flood.
Yeah, you flood the labour market and you push the cost of labour down. I mean, the thing about this transferability of skills and workers and stuff is really interesting. This is an assumption of neoclassical economics, that you can, it doesn't seem to, I mean, I think now the distinction is a bit more refined, but principally it was that if every worker is replaceable, and that if someone loses their job, they will find something else. So in both directions. But this doesn't represent reality at all, because you are then assuming that every person is capable of doing every job that's available, right? So the number of people looking for a job and the amount of jobs available doesn't, of course it increases the likelihood that someone will find something that they're qualified for, but it certainly doesn't guarantee it.
Absolutely.
And the problem is that if you have, you also that when you're having debates about these types of topics with workers' rights and reducing that, you really have to look at what kinds of industries it's most likely going
what kind of jobs even,
but what level of jobs, what positions within certain industries are the most likely to be affected. And when you are someone who is in a job that a lot of people can do, you are most at risk.
Absolutely.
And these are the jobs that also tend to be lesser paid and people with lesser qualifications.
I think not totally. I think it's even like that. The highest qualified ones and the lowest qualified ones are the ones are most in danger. Because the highest qualified ones, there are not so many jobs for them.
Yes.
And the lowest qualified ones, they are super replaceable.
That's true. And you
in the middle.
And you also mentioned it's this upper level, they're expanding the, abolishing the rights for people in sub-management positions now as well.
Yeah, that's also really.
And this is maybe these people that you're talking about that might be affected.
They might be, no, even, I'm talking about really specialist stuff, people who have a PhD in some field. Because they barely have, there are not many positions for that. I think the people who are the best off are like always the technicians, because they can do everything. They can do everything. I mean, I now with my technician stuff, I could immediately start to do some service technician job for some industry. There are so many jobs for that. You can always do sales if you can talk a bit and stuff like that. You can, for people who do technical stuff, the companies are super exchangeable. You can go to this one, do something a bit, go to the next one. That pisses the companies full on off. Yeah, and therefore they're getting pissed off as well and say, so now we're gonna give it to now we turn it around a bit and we make them replaceable. And this is really hard. I think it's just such a bad situation already. And then they say as well, come on people, come on Social Democrats, don't talk about the class fight all the time. The class fight is so 1900. The class fight is totally valid and is totally up to date, because there are the people who have a lot of money and have property and are not relying on having a job. And there are people who are totally dependent on having a job and having an income, otherwise they will land on the street or end up like it is in Austria with the minimum, with the Mindestsicherung, with this 830 euros a month, where you can just rent a little room in a living community and eat pasta every day. So,
but maybe it's not even money anymore. I mean, there's of course a correlation between money and power, but it's somehow also, I mean, rather than a class struggle based on how much you have, it's really also about the influencer. You know, it's a bit more of a power struggle.
Yeah, but
if you're represented or not. This is the foundation of democracy, right? Is that people who don't have a voice should be represented by, should be given a voice through representation. And when somebody on the one side of the blade says, I will look after you, I will make sure that there's enough jobs available. So what the government often does is they say, we'll create more jobs. That gives you, the worker, the opportunity
to exchange,
greater opportunities. On the other side, but we're also going to make it harder. Now we're going to give you a 12-hour day, but first we draw you in by saying we're going to create more jobs, more flexibility, whatever that means.
That's what they did. That's exactly what they did.
And it's really sneaky in a country like Austria, where there's such a strong social democratic history that people aren't even aware of what neoliberalism in a political environment even looks like.
Absolutely, they are totally weak. The people who are elected black-blue, they don't know what's going to happen. Now they already stopped the investment in the social sectors. This is all in the media now already. They openly say that as well. Yeah, we have to stop that now because we have to restructure. And before the restructuring is done, there is no spending anymore. Absolutely sneaky. And now they are touching what is really hectic. So in Austria we have 5 weeks paid holidays, and now the Wirtschaftskammer, the economy chamber, and the Industriellenvereinigung, the club of the industry, in cooperation with the People's Party, they are coming up with a plan now how to restructure, and one of these points is that they're gonna cut 1 week paid holidays, because we don't want to have any gold plating in Austria anymore, they called it. Yeah? That people have, because the average in the European Union is 4 weeks. So we have to shift towards the average. And this is as well the same thing like the 60-hour week. It will give the industry more work hours available without employing any more people. And then they complain on the other side about the unemployed people and also cut the unemployment.
They're backing people into a corner where instead of following, I mean, there's been a number of points in history where a decision has been made, where there's been actual discussion between industry, government, about as systems improve, as efficiency increases, as it has and will continue to, should we rather reduce the work hours or increase the wages? And it's been a conscious decision to increase wages because you want to keep people busy, right?
Why do you want to keep them busy?
But, I mean,
I think this is a good point actually to stop here, because this is the main question. Why should we keep the people busy? Can they not keep themselves busy with reading good books, doing some sports, spending time with the family and with the beloved ones? Good question.